Welcome. Thanks for joining me up here. We're going to start by just doing some quick introductions, so self-introductions if we could, a little bit about your background, how long you've been in this space, and maybe what you're most excited to talk about today. So Olivia.
Thanks, Rehgan, and thank you all for being here. Really excited to kick off after lunch. I know it's always a little bit rocky coming back and trying to wake back up, so hopefully we'll wake you up. I'm Olivia Gamblin. I'm an AI ethicist. I have also just released my first book, Responsible AI, Implement an Ethical Approach in Your Organization. If that doesn't give away my title or my topic of expertise, I'm not sure what else will. But I was one of the first movers in responsible AI back when this was known as AI ethics. I come to this space from an ethics background, and so I talk a lot about human values and how to integrate them into either our use or development of AI. And what I'm really excited to talk about is details. I like practicality. I like how we kick that off of let's actually talk nitty-gritty.
Yep. Amazing. Ursula?
So I'm probably your practicality person, given the job I have. So I'm Ursula Cottone. I work for Huntington Bank as the Chief Data Officer. I'm the first Chief Data Officer there and have been at the two previous banks that I've been with. And I'm probably most excited talking about that practicality. I mean, the title, adoption, integration, and alignment, are exactly what I spend my time on at work. So looking forward to the discussion.
Jana?
I'm Jana Eggers. I'm a mathematician, computer scientist, but I left all of that to be practical. I love implementing AI. I often put as my title, I'm an AI practitioner. And I choose practitioner on purpose because it is all about continuing to practice. Learning, you've heard that a lot at the conference already, that this is not a field that's stagnant. We have to continue to learn, and that practice is really important. And what I'm excited about is talking to you about the nitty-gritty of implementation, which is what we're doing. But I'm also passionate about explainability. So if you do want to talk about explainability and you see me, grab me, because that's where my whole career started. Is I was working with chemists, and I was doing the computation side of it, and I would come up with a result driven by AI, and they would look at me and say, "But why?" And so that's my whole career has really been trying to figure out the why of AI, which is a complex topic.
Yeah, explainability is such a fascinating topic, especially now with a lot of the black box type of models that we just don't know what's happening. And I know there's actually a lot of research happening in that space to try to help explain what some of these generative models are trying to do. Some of them are quite silly, actually, on the logic that it's using. So let's kick things off with some definitions. Every good mathematician likes to start with definitions. So I want to talk about alignment first. I know this word has been getting thrown around quite a bit since Gen AI started booming. So Olivia, do you want to kick us off on what you're hearing from an alignment perspective? What do we mean when we say AI alignment?
Absolutely, and this is coming directly out of my field with responsible AI. When we're talking about AI alignment, we're talking about aligning the use and the outcomes of our AI systems with our values, with our intended outcomes. So what happens quite often is we get swept up in kind of like the shiny lights of AI, and oh, this is really cool, and we start to implement it, and we try and use it, and we lose along the way the actual impact that we were intending with that original use case. So when we're talking about AI alignment, we're looking at what is the human impact that we want to drive with the adoption of these tools, and how do we ensure that the actual adoption is in alignment with that impact. And a lot of that impact, I'm a philosopher, we love definitions as well. A lot of that impact is defined by the values that we're looking to, again, align. That's a lot of alignment there, but that's what it boils down to.
Great, yeah. And I find a lot of people don't even know why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't define it really solidly up front, and you get really lost in the details as you go. Let's talk a little bit about adoption next. So I know that we're mentioning like the why behind it with alignment. Why is adoption so incredibly hard for AI?
I don't think it's just AI that adoption is hard for. So I think of everything that we're doing in terms of data analytics, AI, generative AI, pick whatever the area is, it's really about change management. And change management is hard. The world's been tackling it for hundreds of years, not just in the United States. And so when you think about how hard change management is, that adoption of anything new is change for people. They're doing something different than the way they used to do it, the way they used to think about it. I just said at the lunch, right, Excel is still the #1 analytics tool in the world. There's a reason change is hard. And so I think that's part of what's made this adoption of something people don't understand nearly as much either. And that just makes that adoption that much harder.
Yeah, especially when they're so open-ended. These tools are like blank prompt.
Yeah.
What do I do? Now they've gotten better, right? They've started to put some suggestions in a lot of these tools to get people to start to use them. But I've found that people don't know where to go. They don't know where to start.
Yes.
And there's kind of a psychological element of setting your goal before you're actually engaging with these tools.
Yeah.
So yeah, great point. We're going to dive into some of the change management elements as well. And if you have any tricks to that, let's hopefully get into those too.
Wouldn't that be great?
Right. Yeah, there's unfortunately no cheat code for some of this stuff. So on the integration piece, this is another huge topic. We talked this morning, we heard Sol talk this morning about how hard it is to get these models into production and actually get them over the finish line. And when we talk about integration, it's not just pushing the code to the production Git repo, right? It's so much bigger than that. So Jana, can you help us maybe frame up what integration looks like?
Yeah, I have a whole talk on what's different with software engineering now that we have AI too as one of our tools. And this is one of the places, and I talk about it as what's still the same and what's different. And sometimes I think we throw out a lot of great practices that we have in engineering, and I do think this is one of them. And a lot of software engineers didn't quite know about this, but thinking about what you're implementing as a system of systems. And there's a lot of research and there's a lot of understanding of system of systems. And that's one of the things with the integration that I think we don't step back enough and respect and understand what's been done in the past and understood in the past for system of systems. So that's one of the things I'd say for integration is really take a step back and think about, okay, AI is a piece that's coming in. What is it coming in around? What are the other pieces of AI that are feeding in? What system is it going to, feed itself into? So, for example, we work in the defense and intelligence space, and one of the things that those analysts tell me all the time is, I'm not logging into another system. And, that's just it. So we come in with AI, and I'm like, awesome, my system doesn't even have an interface. So you're good with that, because if you tried to go into my interface, you couldn't find it. And that's one of the things that I think we need to think about is how is the AI going to be found? Where is it going to be seen? And how do we not have them just going to the AI and pulling that answer into Excel? Because that's happening a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. So I want to tie all of these together maybe by getting more tactical. So Olivia, could you walk us through what your typical process with companies is when you start talking about responsible AI? Because it is a big term that typically is followed with a lot of really ambiguous tasks. And everyone wants to do it to check the box, but what does it actually look like?
Absolutely, and here, I'm going to start with another definition, I'm sorry.
Love it.
But responsible AI, for me, as I define it, is AI on responsible foundations. So it's not an add-on. It's not something that you go and adopt and you integrate AI and you're like, great, now let's do responsible. It's part of the practice itself. And so for me, when I'm looking at responsible AI, I'm looking at it saying, these are best practices. I spent a year writing this book about how to design a responsible AI strategy, and at the end of it, I looked at it and I was like, it's basically just a book on good business practice. That's it. This is just basic good business practice. And so to get tactical, what I'm looking at with responsible AI is, and actually one of the biggest problems that companies have is they look and they say, it's a technical problem. We need to go into the code, we need to go into the models and find the technical problems. 9 times out of 10, the problems and the challenges around responsible AI and AI itself actually exist in the people and process supporting the technology. So, to get tactical, typically, when I'm starting with a company in responsible AI, is I go all the way down to the people. And I'm looking at, are they educated? Are they motivated to engage either with these AI systems or with the values that we're looking to integrate into the use of them? And then, are they communicating? There's so many communication silos, and oftentimes you'll run across, say, 2 different data science teams working on completely different definitions of fairness, both with the intention of making fair systems, but not communicating across a team or across 2 different departments, and losing a lot of good tactics in between that. So, tactical again, people, process, and technology, but always reverting back to the people first and looking, are they trained, are they motivated, and are they talking about it?
And so when we think about integrating these AI systems into people's workflows, what types of things do you all see work really well to prepare for that? You know, what sort of plan are you putting in place to make sure that that is happening?
Do you want?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing that we do is that we always have who is the person that's going to be using this and who are the experts in that. So we call them SMEs, the subject matter experts, but they're the ones that are going to be able to judge and kind of say, hey, this is good, except guess what? You didn't take into account weather, and oh, we need to add weather data. And so that ability for them to really look at the answers that are coming out, and then they feel like they own it. I mean, it's amazing how many projects are just created, to your point, in this team over here, and it's going to this team over here, and they don't talk until they're done with their model. And they need to talk and iterate all the time. And it's getting those people engaged and then actually having them lead the taking it to production part. So we always have, think of it as train the trainer. And that's the way when we go into a project, we're always thinking about, okay, who are going to be the trainers in the organization where our system's going in? And how are we training them? It doesn't have to be the nitty-gritties they don't have to learn Python. They're not doing any of that stuff, but they are understanding what's going into it and how to think about that and how to ask the right questions for the people on the data science or implementation and engineering team.
How far, and I've run into this so many times where you're having conversations with, a business or operations team, how far deep do you go into explaining what's happening to get them to be on the same page with you on what good looks like? I mean, how far down do you have to go typically?
I think that if you're going that deep, you're probably going to lose them, which means you have to be able to speak their language. Solving the business problem is the first part. If you understand the business problem you're solving, you can then explain what you're building for them in terms of the solution to their business problem. If you have to explain the nitty-gritty, you've already lost the game. That's not how change is going to help the business partners be able to make it on that journey with you.
How important is it from an explainability perspective to be able to translate good? Because if you look at models and you look at the explainability element, explainability can help them understand what trends are happening within the data or the system that they're engaging with. So interpretability in terms of what these model outputs are providing, how do you get them to trust those systems and get them to a point where they understand what's happening?
It is really hard. I mean, we built our entire platform to be explainable from the ground up. So we're kind of different in that sense because I'm not explaining black box, but I often do get called in, and our company gets mixed in because we're using output of black box model. And there are ways, even I always tell people, I'm like, guys, you can go in and put on night vision goggles and understand a black box model. You can. Maybe not perfectly, but there's ways of interpreting it. And so I give people frameworks for that. What I think is important, and Ursula really goes exactly to what you said, which is focus on the why and what I think are both important. The how is not as important. And I think as technologists, we're so excited about the how, like, oh, we didn't used to be able to do this. This is so exciting. And, you know, I often describe it as, you know, someone who's imbibed too much and they're searching, you know, that old, it was like a New Yorker cartoon, and the person is searching under the street light, and the policeman comes up and says, "What are you doing?" And they say, "Oh, I'm looking for my keys." And they're like, "Oh, where did you lose them?" And they're like, 2 blocks away, but the light's better here. Right? And I think we get so excited on that, and we don't realize that the business people are 2 blocks away, right? And so, but we're like, no, look at this light. It's amazing. You've never seen light like this. And they're over here, and we haven't told them why that light's important, or we haven't thought about how do we bring that light to them.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that I think is important to focus on, which may not be what we're so excited about, because we have this new technology that we know is going to change things, but because we haven't built that bridge or carried it over or brought them to us, it's not going to go anywhere. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Can I pick up on the why actually there? So as an ethicist and looking at values, the values are the why. It's like, why are we doing this? And when I'm talking about values, I'm talking about the human values such as empathy and resilience, but I'm also talking about AI values like fairness and privacy, and I'm talking about business values. You have to be able to connect. You know, why would we want a fair system? Well, a fair system helps us better serve a wider user base. Great, I get the why, both from a technical perspective. I get that I'm looking at different bias metrics within our data set, within our models, but then I get the business perspective of, well, of course I want to serve the widest amount of users. That's going to be a better product at the end of the day. But so defining good, at least from my perspective, is sitting down at the start and saying, what values are we looking at here? How are we connecting them to our business objectives? What do those values look like in practice, both on the business model side, the business case, but the technical side as well? So everyone, even though they have, say, a customized definition of that value, they're all rooted in the same central point. So everyone, no matter where they're working or what aspect they're working on, they're all working towards that same why.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you guys are talking too, we do a lot of Microsoft Copilot rollout support. And the reason is because companies are kind of cutting their teeth on that in terms of wide-scale adoption of some AI tool that people are aware of, right? That they're directly engaging with. We find super low adoption in those tools because people either don't find them to be useful for what they're doing, or that it's just not better than their current situation. One of the other reasons that we're seeing low adoption is this idea of risk and inserting risk into business processes where maybe it doesn't need to be inserted. So I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about risk and how some of the ethical considerations are in there, but also from a legal regulatory perspective, security perspective. These are the things that are holding companies back more broadly. And I know we were talking about the regulatory ecosystem, like, why is everybody so obsessed with the AI regulations? But we were basically saying it's these lines that are trying to be drawn to be very specific on do's and don'ts. So maybe to kick us off in this kind of risk landscape, Ursula, could you give us a little bit
Banking.
Yeah. I was going to say, you probably have had your fair share of conversations about this. Could you give us a little bit of what that looks like and what sorts of conversations are being had?
Yeah, I think, so risk is a topic, obviously, from a banking perspective that is in everything we talk about. And regulatory guidance is so much of what drives a lot of the work that happens or doesn't happen for banking. So the lack of a specific regulation for us is an impediment because we can keep moving, specifically in the generative AI space as opposed to the broader AI landscape, we understand a lot of that because we also have regulations, fair lending, right, that would prevent us from doing certain things, right? So from a fairness, explainability, I have to be able to do that. That is part of everything that we do. It's ingrained in our work. But so not having some of those regs around what's going to happen with generative AI has us moving slower because you don't want to be on the wrong side of that regulation when it does come down. And so you have to be very, very cautious about what you want to implement, what that looks like, and the impact it has from a security perspective as well. So everybody's heard the horror stories of something in the cloud getting, some sort of vulnerability that gets exposed. In order to do a lot of this stuff, you've got to be using some very large scalable platform, likely cloud. So now you've got additional risk from that perspective. So it's just you're trying to be very, very thoughtful on what your customers expect of you. Banks, right? You expect a different level of privacy. You expect a different level of our consciousness about your data. Another company, somebody who makes batteries, isn't going to have that same issues that we would have from a regulatory and our just customer expectations. So I think of when we think about fairness and we think about explainability, we probably are already operating under a higher bar than other types of companies, other industries might have to do. So risk is embedded in every discussion, and it does slow us down. Risk, compliance, regulatory, but it's a very deliberate being slower to make sure that we don't, step in something that our customers would be upset with.
Yeah, for sure. And how are you, I guess more broadly, how are you seeing risk being managed in the sense of, I know it's a constraint, right?
Yes.
But how do we get around some of this stuff and still be innovative as a company if we're trying to navigate all of these, all the red tape? So what does that conversation look like? Who's in the room? What sorts of discussions are being had there?
I feel like it's a lot of people in the room. Everybody here would be part of that discussion. And that is some of it. You're going to have legal, you have to have risk, you've got to have compliance, you have to have security, you've got the business, right, that understands the customer side of it, and then you've got any of the technology components to it, plus then what we're trying to do potentially from an innovative perspective. So it is a lot of players that have to come into that dialogue.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Olivia, too, if you could add in some perspective on transparency and fairness, obviously, from a legal perspective is what people are thinking about. How do you have conversations with organizations that aren't regulated like that and convincing them that this is not just a good thing to do, but necessary in terms of performing better?
Yeah. So there's a couple different methods that I take here, and it really depends on the people in the room because you have some companies that are move fast, break things at all costs. That's a very different conversation from a company that's saying, yeah, we want to do the right thing, we're not really sure how to do it. But so speaking to the companies, let's say on the extreme end of break everything, go fast, everything you want, what I stress to them is being compliant is one step above illegal. That's a joke, but it's true. And not saying that being compliant isn't important. Very, very important. But I use that as a joke to start the conversation of, you're not going to find the cutting edge if you're just compliant. You're going to find the cutting edge by pushing beyond that. And nowadays, in such a flooded market, our market is voting by looking for where our values are in alignment. When we have such a flooded, inundated market, we're looking for brands, for companies that we trust, for products that we are in alignment with our own values. And so for a company, then, when it comes to, say, AI product design or the actual use of AI, being able to operate in alignment with that values creates a brand that is going to stand the test of a lot of disruption that's constantly coming in waves with AI. So this is where really I flip the conversation on to the innovative side of ethics, of responsible AI, where we're using that to find the competitive edge. It's not just about the risk mitigation and compliance, because if a company doesn't really care about regulation and compliance, nothing I say is going to convince them. But I can convince them if I'm talking about their bottom line. And so it's flipping that conversation just into a different perspective. Same content, same material that we're doing, different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're talking about that, I've read a lot of articles about why OpenAI has been able to do what they've done. And one of the things that they called out was reputation. Mm-hmm. They're not a Microsoft. They're not at the level of having a brand recognition in the industry and trying to ruin that brand. They didn't have a brand. No. Nobody knew who they were before ChatGPT, right? A few people, but not many. And I think that's really important to think about, maybe culturally. So, as people are thinking about responsible AI, what kind of company are you at? What industry? How big is it? Do you have a brand to uphold? These are all very critical things to think through on how you tackle something like ethical AI.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add to that? Because I think it's so important. So I work in defense and intelligence, and I'm going to be very blunt and say I am regularly in meetings when I hear warheads on foreheads. So that's the type of risk I'm talking about. We're in financial services, so I deal with that regulation, and we're in healthcare, and we're in patient care and healthcare, so not supply chain side. So these are all critical areas. And regulation, I appreciate it. There's nothing. To me, it makes me accountable for the data that I'm using. And that, I think, every company should be accountable for. I mean, you just brought up these big tech companies, and look at what Google did when they launched Gemini. If you saw, when the advertisements that they came out with said, oh, if my camera's not working, if you guys know what film cameras are, there's one right down there if you don't know. Well, sorry, that's digital. It's not film. Sorry. Failed. So there used to be these things that looked like that, and they actually had this film in there, and and the shutter open and exposed light. And when they launched the ad campaign, they were, kind of saying, hey, what do I do when when the lever doesn't turn? And the answer in the ad was, open the back door of your camera. Those who know what that is would be horrified, right? Because you're like, oh, so I don't care about the pictures that I just took, right? Because I just exposed my film. But that's what the AI said to do. And that's where we don't understand the context of the data that's going into this. And by the way, if you didn't know, Google's previous big announcement also had a big problem like that, because they talked about the James Webb Telescope, and they said it was the first time that an exoplanet had been taken a picture of, and that's not true. That happened back in the 70s. If they actually searched Google, they would have found that out. But this goes back to people are taking these brand risk, to your point.
Brand risk.
It's a brand risk, which, thank God we have regulations for some of these things, because we don't want to take that risk with people's money. We don't want to take that risk with people's lives. I wish Google cared more about that stuff, because then they would pay more attention to their data. And good data feeds good AI. And when you don't care, and when you just go in and you go, and your marketing team just goes, well, we're Google. We know everything in the world, so it's going to be perfect. And they don't go use their own effing product to check these things. They would have known that, or, had an adult in the room that said, well, there were these film cameras. Anyway, so there's good things for diversity and all of that. But I think the core of most regulations make you look back at your data. And what data am I using? Is it appropriate for the problem? Am I using it appropriately? That's nothing but good for AI. So you all rush to financial services or healthcare or any of these regulations, but don't sit there and say, oh, I want to go someplace that breaks things. It's like, go to these places that have that infrastructure. And that, to me, is even more powerful because I don't have to worry about that as much. I still have to worry about it. But it gives me this amazing foundation that I can really go faster because I've got such infrastructure behind me.
Yeah, I think you're also bringing up an incredible point here too. When I talk to folks, everyone wants to talk about regulations. They want to talk about, the EU AI Act or the Data and AI Act in Canada or the executive order in the US. But really a lot of that is talking about high-risk use cases. So when we get down to it, we're talking about the accessibility to housing. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about employment. We're talking about very basic things, necessities, human rights, right, that we're trying to protect with those types of things. We're probably not talking about the models that are doing something in the supply chain. And so I think it's really important to contextualize AI in that regard, because when we are talking about regulations, we're usually talking about it in a high-risk area, and not every company is solving those types of problems. I want to touch briefly on this concept of over-reliance, because let's say in a perfect world we achieve alignment to an extent. We achieve seamless, beautiful integration. We get tons and tons of adoption. Where is our risk, like you just mentioned on that ad campaign, on over-reliance? How many people think about the electrical grid on a daily basis? Couple, not many. Right?
If you live in Houston, you might be thinking about it right now.
Totally. And how many of you expect your lights to turn on when you go home?
Yes.
Exactly. This is the concept of potential over-reliance, right? Because if the grid goes down, now what? How many of you have generators? Great. So you're good. So I just think when we think about AI, what is our generator? How do we set ourselves up to not be in this situation of over-reliance? What are you guys seeing in terms of tactics that companies can take to make sure we don't fall into those traps?
I can pick this up.
Yeah.
So it's coming back to people again. It always comes
Those
back to
darn
people.
people.
I know, darn it. So with this and over-reliance, and when you work in ethics, you get asked all the time, when are the overlords going to take over, and so on. What does that mean for us as people? But I get asked all the time, what's your biggest fear? What is the biggest risk? And for me, it always comes down to the biggest risk is that we lose respect for our own humanity in this process, meaning we become over-reliant. There is a lot that humans can do that AI can't, and that's okay. And there's a lot that AI can do that humans can't because our brains can't process that mass amount of data. That's why we have these tools. We're augmenting our intelligence. So what I see in terms of companies doing it well, when it comes to preparing and adopting these tools and safeguarding against over-reliance, is to invest into the people. Going about it saying, hey, not let's replace these different parts of your job, but actually what parts of your job do you find joy in and find purpose in? And what parts can we complement so that you can do your work better? And ensuring when we're looking at that, where is your critical thinking? It comes down to thought. Like, where is your critical thinking? Are you given the resources to be able to learn how to use these tools, how to engage with them? Like you were saying with prompts, with this blank prompt, it's only as good as the prompt, and the prompt is the human. If we ourselves don't know how to ask good questions into these generative systems, we're not going to get good answers back. It's a relationship between the two. So maintaining that respect that humans have a role to play, and we are able to bring in different forms of intelligence that don't exist in the world of AI, but are complemented by it, that's where we're going to see that counterbalance against over-reliance of, it's okay, almost saying, validating, hey, I've got this emotional reaction. Why do I have this emotional reaction? Well, let me critically think about it and dive in and use that as a data input that I know the AI system's not going to be picking up on, but then I can use the tool and be able to move forward with it. So just understanding there is that balance.
Absolutely. And explainability is going to be huge with this too, right? It's probably one of the only ways that we're going to avoid people being over-reliant on a system. Like, I don't know, but I'm not trying to trash Copilot by Microsoft. I just do a lot of these implementations, so I've just seen a lot of it. But in Outlook, you can ask, like, what are the tasks that I did this past week? Summarize them based on my emails. And it'll totally make stuff up that you never did. I mean, like, out of the blue, it'll completely make things up. It's crazy, right? And I know what I did last week. So my safeguard is me knowing what I did last week and saying, that's not right. What if you didn't know that? Can you talk a little bit about like how we can get to better interfaces or better user experiences, Jana, on explainability, or just getting to that point where the user can trust the system, or maybe they never can?
Yeah, I think, at some point they aren't going to be able, I mean, they should be able to trust it, but they're not going to be able to understand it because, and this goes back to, humans are good at one thing and computers are good at another. We're good at abstraction. Computers aren't actually good at abstraction. They're good at calculations and fine details. And that's where, think about the medical case where we really want and have wanted very personalized medicine. That's very hard for an individual doctor to do. They're generally going with, okay, these symptoms are kind of like this. So when we really get down to every individual is different, we need help from the machines for something like that. And so that's where I think we need to think about teaming. And we need to think about teaming in the sense of, hey, this is where I'm going to trust the computer because I've had the regulation and I understand where the data is coming from and I understand how it's processed and we have expertise that is doing that, and that's great. So I'm going to let the machine do that. Then we need to understand when is it the two of us together, because the doctor's looking at the results from the machine and going, well, that doesn't quite fit because the machine's kind of collaborating with it. Right? It's my partner, it's my teammate there, and I'm kind of collaborating with it. And I may even be able to say, well, what if, this is the case instead of this, and kind of have that interaction. And then there's the cases where it's just going to be the human because we're fucking awesome, right? So it's like, let us be us and stop. I kind of always flip that around when folks say, like, well, the machines are going to take over. And I'm like, well, thank you, because I'm tired and I don't get all my work done. So please find the places the machine can do what I can do, because I have so much more fun things to do. And I think that's where we need to kind of reorient ourselves, is what is it that it can do really well, which is not summarizing my day.
Totally. And I think it's so funny, too, when I hear people talk about, like, this thing's going to replace me. And I'm like, how much free time do you currently have at work? Not a lot, right? We are overextended. So and have we ever, as a society, like, stopped doing things or come up with things not to work on? No. The answer is no. So I think that's something, it's this, like, limited mindset to say, like, we're at this capacity and you don't go beyond that capacity. We're running out of time, so I want to make sure that we can get to questions. I think we have time for maybe 2 questions.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So in an earlier session, the speaker mentioned that the more AI usage, our cognitive abilities start to decline. And with the need for speed, which is where I see the biggest benefit, how do we ensure that we're not going to lose our ability to think? I think Olivia and Jana already touched on this, but I would really appreciate it if you could expand a little more.
I think there's ways, I'll jump in because I'm passionate about this. I think we need to reorient how we think about what we do. So, for example, when we look at computer science teaches us to code, right? What it doesn't do well is teach us how to read code. And that's a different cognitive ability, which now I think is more important, or becoming more important, because we're getting to Gen AI that's generating code. And then you have things like, look at mapping. Like, who knows how to read a map now? No one, because we're all just like, is my phone pointed in the right direction, right? But the question is, we need to take a step back and think about what we need to train ourselves to do. And I do think there's still going to be cognitive ability. Now, if we just hand over, like I said, as we do with mapping and stuff like that, that may be okay. But where are we using the brain cells again? And there's plenty of things that we're going to have to learn, like reading code is my example, but I think if you step back and think about those things, how do I look at this skeptically? How do I inquire what data it's using? How do I evaluate that data to understand, does it apply to my situation? So I think it's more that it's going to be a different type of thinking than we do, and we need to train and expect that more.
I love that answer. One of my first internships was a QA person for SQL. I didn't know how to write SQL, by the way. So, but I did afterwards because I had to learn exactly what it was doing. And a lot of people are flipping into this like quality assurance type of role on things that are being generated. And it actually is forcing you to critically think about the thing that was generated. So I'm finding it's almost harder because now you're sitting, why did it do that? Is it supposed to be doing that? You get into this kind of rabbit hole of being able to think that way. As opposed to just, coding away.
It's harder to edit than create.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to thank you first for your insights. So I thought about the question, particularly around regulation or the discussion that we were having. My question is, how do we make sure that we are actually solving problems that exist in the market and not relying so much on risk that we're missing opportunities? An example would be in the fintech space, right? So if you look at some products like PayPal or Zelle or even Chime, right? So they address holes that are in traditional banking for people to receive payments more quickly or to serve populations who have traditionally had problems with access to credit. So how do we ensure that we have regulations that are robust, but at the same time we're not missing out on, say, huge populations in developing countries who would benefit from our services, but if we use traditional risk models, we might not be able to serve?
If I had the answer to that question, I would be probably not sitting here with you today. Because it's a nonstop balancing problem, right? I mean, you're trying to find ways for companies to make money while mitigating the risk, trying to be innovative, but not putting your reputation on the line, right? I mean, you're balancing all of these pieces, and it's every single industry, product, company has to answer those questions for themselves, right? And what are those boundaries that they are drawing? To your point, right? Like Olivia said, that each company is having to struggle with this, right? Whether you have regulation or don't have regulation, you've got to figure out what that right balancing act is. Because I'm sure there are things that people haven't come up with. I mean, people can sit around their kitchen table and come up with all kinds of cool product ideas, but they may never make any money. And so they never make it to market, even if they would have been perfect for some niche of the world, country, whatever it might be.
Yeah, this is by no means an answer to that question, but I have seen the companies that are really diligent at cataloging all of these ideas and at least putting reasons behind not pursuing them. Because you get people who come and go inside of an organization, and you end up starting from scratch again and again. Someone's like, why haven't we tried this? And it's like, okay, you're like the 100th person to ask that question, and here's why. And I think if we think big, obviously, document all of that, but be very diligent in saying, these are the reasons why, and if those things change, then we can unlock ourselves to go pursue that. But I don't see a lot of companies doing that in a very detailed way. So we are out of time, but we're all going to be hanging out after for a little bit. So thank you so much, everyone. Please provide a big round of applause for our panelists.